is on a formal 2-month sabbatical and will not be here with us today to present, but we hope to see him back the end of August. Dean Buckenberg has served as the communication partner for the city for many years, and Dean retired April 30th, and I have formally accepted that responsibility, so I look forward to that. Derek Flanagan, my other partner specializing in government audits, is here to present and to talk to you about your report, as well as other team members that were involved. So really at this time, I just want to turn it over to Derek to walk you through the results.
All right, thank you, Keith. As he mentioned, my name is Derek Flanagan, an audit partner out of our Fargo office. I specialize primarily in governmental audits. I've been with Eide Bailly for a little over 10 years now, straight out of college, and here to report on the 2015 audit. Now, when we come into audit, we're coming in to do 2 separate audits. We're going to do the audit of your financial statements, and we do that in accordance with government auditing standards, and we also have a separate federal audit. And the language of what that's called has changed in the current year. You may have heard A133 mentioned in the past. Well, that is no longer applicable. It is called an audit in conformity with uniform guidance. And so just to let you know, and that's what Title II U.S. Code of Federal Regulations is referring to there. Starting with the financial statements audit, a couple things to report on that. First off, you did receive an unmodified opinion. That's the opinion you want, and that's the opinion you received. So yay, woo! Somebody's got to make this lively, right? There were no audit adjustments. We did not have any audit adjustments identified during the audit, and there were no past adjustments as well. There were no material weaknesses identified during the audit, and there was one significant deficiency that we identified. This is a repeat finding from the previous year, and that is just that we helped with the preparation of your schedule of expenditure of federal awards, or the CFA. When it was given to us, there were some adjustments to that we made, and thus we have to report this finding that we helped with the preparation of that. And again, as I mentioned, that is a repeat finding from the prior year. We were also able to gain comfort over your significant estimates. A large part of those financial statements is getting a comfort level on all the significant estimates that are embodied in those financial statements, and performing procedures to gain that comfort level with those estimates, and we were able to gain that comfort level. The city internally prepares the CAFR, or the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, and they've received the Government Finance Officers Association, or the GFOA's, Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for the previous 35 years, and we expect that will be received again in the year 2015. The second audit that we performed, the federal audit, or the audit in conformity with uniform guidance, I'd like to report on that you will receive an unmodified opinion surrounding that. And that audit really takes on, the financial statements are largely concerned with numbers. The federal audit is really concerned with 2 things, and that is compliance with your grant, the grants that you received, and your internal controls that you have surrounding the grants that you receive. And we have to go through an evaluation process to determine which programs we test. And in the current year, we tested 2 programs. They were the Community Development Block Grant and Highway Planning and Construction. During that audit, there were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies identified in either compliance or in internal control. And a note on that too, you have 60 days to complete that. Once you issue your financial statements, you have 60 days to complete the federal audit as well. And it is near completion. We're just a couple of logistical items to wrap up on that. And that is our presentation. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to open it up to questions.
Okay. Are there any questions that you might have? I have a couple. As Tracy knows, this is not my strong suit, but we will work on it. Did I hear you say that the city prepares the CAFR?
Yes.
Our finance department does that, and then
Yep.
it's sent to you for review?
Yep,
Okay,
yep,
okay, and then on to the state
yep,
for acceptance, and
Yep.
then back to us.
yep.
I
Yep.
was not aware that that's the way it went. I thought that you prepared the CAFR as part of the audit.
Nope, nope. It's prepared by the city, and then we review it. And that's why if we prepared it, you would receive a finding that we helped with the preparation of your financial statements, and you did not receive that finding because the city did prepare the financial statements.
Ever do that for us?
Not that I can remember.
Okay, okay, just questioning,
Are you
asking.
aware of any time that I Bailey's? 30 years ago, he says, maybe?
Yeah, that is correct.
So,
Okay, that's good. That was my main question, and nothing was found on the community block grants or highway streets.
Nope.
Irregularities. Okay. Anything else from anybody else? That's why we have you experts here. Okay, good, good. Continue.
Nope, just want to extend our thanks. I want to thank our members of the Finance Committee and first of all, the Audit Committee for your participation, and we look forward to the planning to begin again. We already start thinking about what we're going to do next year.
Yeah.
And so that will be this fall, and we'll get that started here in the fall and set up the appropriate meetings.
Let me ask about is this be the appropriate time to ask about the CAFR coming back to finance rather than to this committee? Or would that be in another place?
I think it's appropriate.
Can you give us some insight on that now as to what?
The insight I have is, and I'll defer to Tracy as well, but that the CAFR was posted, is what you're referring to.
Right.
Posted as it was, making it to available for rating agencies. And timing, this meeting, the requirement to get that posted was there. The timing of this meeting was subsequent to that date, and as a result of coming to being posted before it came to this meeting.
Okay, so it had to be posted so that our bond ratings could.
For the bonding and for the rate review.
Okay.
Yep, and that'll definitely be on our schedule for next year as it
And
relates to the
Mr. Chair, I
timing.
just remind you that we did have some difficulty in getting this particular meeting scheduled as well.
Yeah,
too.
it was originally, I think, for end of June, and then we had some conflicts with that, so then we,
The first one was April.
Yeah,
What
originally
Dean still
April,
here was
yeah.
April 28th, and that's when we were originally scheduled.
We didn't have everything.
And we weren't in a position to really do anything.
Right.
May then came, then there was the new council members posting of who was going to be on the committee, the selection of that, and that put that off to June, and then that got delayed to July.
It will happen. It
Yeah,
will happen.
right.
I just needed to have my own mind how things are working and why it happened, and now it makes very good sense.
You bet. Yep.
So, okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
To you and your firm.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, next on the agenda, review audit 1602, information technology general and application controls. Who's got that one?
yeah, that'd be Ashley. She'll present the report, and then we do have 2 members from management for if there might be a question for management, so I'll let Ashley take that.
All right. This audit was approved in the 2015 annual audit plan, but it wasn't started until 2016. We had it as a carry-forward audit. The IT department is part of the Central Services major organizational unit. They oversee all of the city's computer operations, technical support, systems analysis, programming, database management, security management, and IT training. We had 3 objectives for this audit. 1 was to determine if general controls are in place and functioning. 2, to determine if application controls for Munis are in place and functioning. And 3, to determine if the city was using leading practices for hardware inventory. For the results of the audit, we reviewed the IT general controls in place. For physical security, we verified a criminal background check is performed for all new hires in the IT department, and that physical access to the data center and server room is properly restricted and monitored. We also verified there are proper access controls in place to protect city data, such as the use of firewalls and usernames and passwords. There is a password policy in place, but we did offer some suggestions in this regard, and I'll talk about that when we get to the recommendations. We also reviewed the environmental controls in place and verified they were proper and regular, maintained, and inspected. For backup and contingency planning, they have a written continuity of operations plan to help them resume operations in the event of a natural disaster or unplanned interruption. They also maintain a secondary backup location of all vital systems, applications, and equipment. For change management, we determined a policy has been drafted and is currently being followed. However, the policy hasn't been finalized and approved by management, and that's part of our recommendation number 2. This policy requires that before any changes can be made to software programs or hardware configurations, they must be approved by the IT department and tested and validated to ensure they're working, and then documented. For information security management, we determined the department has drafted a policy, but that also hasn't been finalized and approved, which is part of recommendation 2 as well. This policy outlines the roles and responsibilities of the IT department and city employees in making sure city information and information systems are secure. Earlier this year, IT had an external IT consultant come in and review the network and security controls in place. I reviewed these results with management, and we determined that each item was appropriately addressed. In the next section, we reviewed the application controls over Munis, which is the city's main financial software application. We determined the access to Munis was appropriate by reviewing the active roles and assigned users for the critical financial activities. We did make a recommendation that access to Munis be approved and that the list of active roles be reviewed regularly. We also performed a review of journal entries and purchase orders and concluded that those are processed accurately and timely by Munis. In the last section, we verified that the city was using leading practices to manage its IT hardware inventory items. The department uses a database called IT Inventory to track the city-owned computers, monitors, printers, etc. We reviewed a sample of items from the database and traced them to physical presence. Of the 28 items selected for testing, we noted 3 instances where the information in the database was inaccurate or items were missing from the database, and this supports recommendation 4. We made 4 recommendations to management. For the first one, we recommended that password policy requirements be redefined to increase the security position of the city. Best practices suggest that long passwords or passphrases should be used. Management agreed and will push for a 10-character minimum password by March 31st of 2017. For the second one, we recommended that IT department policies and procedures be regularly reviewed and updated, approved by management, and communicated to applicable staff as they're critical to the overall internal control system. Management agreed and will finalize and approve the information security policy by August 1st. For a third one, we recommended that finance management develops a written policy in regards to who grants and approves access to the user roles in Munis. The policy should also include how often the active user roles are reviewed and who's responsible for reviewing them. Management agrees that there should be an approval process when assigning user roles. However, this is currently a functionality issue with the software. They will, however, develop a written policy for who should have access to the functionality and how often roles will be reviewed. The date of expected implementation for this is October 2016, and we'll follow up on that. Our last recommendation was that IT management should develop a process to periodically confirm the accuracy of the IT inventory database. Management agreed and will conduct these reviews on a semi-annual basis. Overall, we concluded that IT controls and practices are appropriate and functioning properly. The implementation of the recommendations will strengthen controls further, And I'd like to thank the IT and finance employees for their cooperation and courtesy during the audit. So with that, does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Ashley. Do we have some questions? No questions? Well, I had one back here. Now I can't find it. Well, I will say this, that, oh, I know what it was. Got it here. Longer passwords, minimum of 10 characters, or use of passphrases dramatically increase security. It also puts a lot of pressure on me, trying to remember them.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Do we know
Counselor
how?
Nicer?
Thank you. Do we know how often users are required to change their passwords on the domain?
Yes.
Good afternoon, John Clemmy, IT Manager for the City of Sioux Falls. To answer your question, it's every 90 days our users are required to change their password. Whether or not it expires after 90 days, but you can change it more often than that if you would like.
And
Yes.
and you would require then going forward 10 characters minimum plus the complexity, because complexity is really one of the bigger
Correct,
issues.
yes. We do have the 8-character plus the use of uppercase, lowercase, numeric, and special characters today. The specific recommendation is we don't specifically require a special characters, but we require 3 of the 4 that I mentioned.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ashley, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This would be the appropriate time to ask for approval of this audit in a form of a motion?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Arnie did. Okay. Next, review audit 1506, citywide accounts receivable. Who has that one?
Kimberly?
Kim.
She's going to take that one.
Right. The audit of accounts receivable was not actually included in our 2015 annual audit plan. It was a special request, which was reviewed and approved at the April 16, 2015 meeting. The City of Sioux Falls had more than $30 million in accounts receivables owed to them as of December 31st, 2015. To put that into a little bit of context, about 75% of that amount was from government activities such as taxes and federal grant monies, mostly for community development. And those receivables also represented revenues of approximately $276 million from government activities, as well as $80 million from business type activities. The city currently does not use a centralized system to record its accounts receivable. The reasons behind that, we have the departments maintain individual billing systems that are unique to their services that are provided. That does allow them to provide better customer service, gather better performance metrics, and to make the best use of staff time. We have 7 different billing software systems that are in use in addition to the city's main financial software, Tyler Munis. They're listed on page 2 of the report. And although departments do maintain these systems, the city's finance department ultimately bears the responsibility for the billing and collections policies as well as financial reporting of these revenues and receivables. The city's billing and collections policy was last updated in 2015 to ensure that billing and collection efforts are secure, efficient, and they do provide for effective financial forecasting. The finance staff perform monthly reconciliations of the subsidiary ledgers, quarterly reviews of aging reports, and they regularly review delinquent accounts across all 7 systems. The objectives of our audit were to identify what types of revenues should be recognized as accounts receivable for the city, to determine if the receivables are accurately recorded, to determine if delinquent accounts are being collected in accordance with the procedures and internal controls over billing, collection, write-off functions, and that they're properly designed and implemented. And also, we reviewed previously identified accounts which had been placed on payment programs. Regarding the scope of our audit, we reviewed internal controls and policies as they currently exist, and the accounts receivable balances that we looked at were as of December 31st, 2015. The results of the audit, we identified revenues that were reported as charges for services under the program revenues column of the city's financial statements as revenue that would produce receivables for the city. We did not test general revenues such as property, sales, frontage, and entertainment taxes and intergovernmental revenues. They do create receivables throughout the year, but they are low-risk items because they're due from other governmental entities. We did look at the accounts receivable subsidiary ledger reports, like I said, as of December 31st, 2015. We reviewed these ledgers for accounts that would have credit balances, individually significant account balances, and we reviewed them for mathematical accuracy. The reports were then reconciled to the general ledger, and then we took the general ledger account balances and reconciled them with the amount reported on the CAFR. The finance department staff actually performs these reconciliations on a monthly basis. However, we did not, we noted that there wasn't documentation retained of this procedure, so our audit recommendation would be that they document that, and then we can test that. As far as delinquent accounts and those being properly collected, the city does a great job at keeping their accounts up to date. Billing occurs within 31 days of the time of service, and the majority of our vendors are set up on automatic bank withdrawals for payment. We reviewed the subsidiary ledgers for individually significant account balances, which would have been approximately over $100,000. We identified 2 accounts that were past due that met this criteria. One represented revenue due from a federal grant, and then the other was an amount due from a recent residential development project. We followed up on these. Both are considered fully collectible. And like I said, finance staff does perform regular analysis on accounts receivable. They proactively identify delinquencies to prevent increases in bad debt write-offs. Our only suggestion around that was that they could add in some trendline analysis tools, to identify recurring trends, and they're going to look at that and see whether that would benefit them. Key controls over accounts receivable are in place and are functioning properly. We do have proper segregation of duties between the billing and collections procedures. Contract terms are clear and invoices are user-friendly, which does promote timely payments from our vendors. Additionally, in the control area, the city's financial software systems, as Ashley mentioned, have restricted access and it's password protected. And then we're going to a point of increasing those password requirements. All journal entries do go through proper approval prior to being posted. And then getting to the accounts we identified at the landfill. Early in 2015, the City Finance Department did identify 6 accounts that had significant past due balances. We have reviewed those accounts. 5 of 6 of them had signed settlement agreements on file. The other account had agreed to a court-ordered judgment as part of a state court lawsuit. And happy to say at the time of our report that all 5 accounts on payment programs were paid in full and that we'd received a significant payment on the remaining account. Subsequent to identifying these accounts, new policies and procedures have been put in place at the landfill. If a vendor does go past due, greater than 60 days, they are cut off from using the landfill unless they pay cash, at the time of service. They have to continue to pay cash until their balance is brought current. That policy actually went into effect as of May 31st, 2016, so we have not been able to test that due to the fact that none of the accounts would have been 60 days past due. But as part of our normal follow-up procedures, we will verify that that's in place. And then we did just have the one recommendation that the Finance Department develop written procedures regarding that reconciliation process. and that reconciliation should be performed on a regular basis and documented to ensure that the amounts reported on the financial statements are accurate. Management was in agreement with that. They'll continue to do the monthly reconciliations, which will now be approved by a finance management staff, and that the reconciliations will be retained until the completion of the financial audit for that year.
Good.
I would go ahead and open it up to any questions you might have.
I just have a comment. The hard copy you have in front of you is the one we're asking to approve. The one that was attached, or the one I emailed on Monday, we made a couple of tweaks when we talked to management just to correct a couple of numbers. So it's the one in front of you and the ones that are on the table over there. That's the ones that's
Okay.
the revised draft.
real
So
one.
the real one, yeah.
Questions for Kim? Go ahead, Councilor Neisert.
You sort of intimated this, but for all of the different departments that would have anything where they would invoice, is there a policy in place for each one of them to make sure that there's some bright line in which you would be cut off if you go over a certain amount, so you don't end up with a very large collection in water billing, for example?
Regarding dollar amounts?
Yeah, whether it be dollar amounts or past due, or just some policy. I don't know what it would be, but
I might let finance staff speak to that. I don't know if there's a dollar threshold.
I can speak about utility billing. If somebody doesn't pay their water bill, they let them know right away, and they will shut off the water. So their uncollectibles are
Right, particular to
tiny,
that
yeah.
system. But I don't know that we have, say, a dollar threshold, like an overarching dollar threshold, I think is what you're asking, citywide? Or are you talking
well, just
specific-
anywhere that would be billing where we're collecting, they're not paying at the time of service. You know, for example, to get into a pool, that there's a policy in place for each division so that nobody can get too far out, just like we've corrected in the landfill. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Right, okay.
Director Turback?
Yes, thank you. Tracy Turback with the Finance Office. I can try to respond to that. Our policy, our formal policy that's referred to in the audit report sets out some general parameters for that. Each department is unique. Mr. Oaksel mentioned the utility billing, where we've got a pretty good leverage to collect from people, and if they're not paying, we can shut off their service. In other departments, for example, like the Public Health Department, where we don't have that ability, we can't turn people away if they come in and they've got they need dental work, and they're entitled to receive that service. So we do have to tailor the procedures and the kind of requirements and thresholds and so forth, depending upon the type of service that we're talking about. But the general policy is that if they're more than 60 days past due, then they do get their services restricted if that's within our ability. Okay. So yeah, I think it's proven to be a big improvement to the policy and the kind of a citywide approach to controlling receivables to prevent accounts from getting significantly past due, whether they're large or small amounts.
Yep, good.
Thank you.
I have one question, Kim, on the recommendations in the last sentence there. The Finance Department will complete until completion will retain. These reconciliation will be retained by Finance Department until completion of financial audit for that year, either in paper or electronic form. Is that satisfactory to you to have it held that long? Is that long enough?
I believe so. I would defer to Rich. I don't
yeah.
foresee us going back more than a year on that.
I don't foresee us going back more than a year, so I
Okay.
think that's sufficient. So.
I assume that was the case, but I wanted to make
Yeah.
sure that
Right.
that was the situation. And the other thing I say is I know you said that the policy going into effect May 31st on landfill accounts will be reviewed. That'll be one of the things that's on your follow-up agenda.
that'll be-
And
yes.
I appreciate you very much going back on those kind of things to make sure that our audit recommendations are followed, or to come up with a reason why they aren't being followed. So thank you very much for that. Any other questions? Would someone like to make a motion to accept and approve this audit?
Move to approve, Neisert.
Second.
Kylie with a second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. not the last one, but audit review, storm drainage.
Well, I told management they might want to come in at 4:30 for this one, so I'll ask the chair if maybe if we do the special audit work
You bet.
request, and
We may
then
do it.
we'll give them a few minutes to.
Do you want to handle this, or you want me to?
I can do it.
Good.
Yep. Okay, so we have for the new members of the committee, we have a special protocol that we identified, I think 8-9 years ago, just for situations like this. Any elected official, the mayor or council member or a department director can request special audit work that wasn't in the annual audit plan, and so the procedure is that they have to present a written request to the audit committee, and if the audit committee approves it, then we can proceed and do the work. If not, the audit committee is supposed to give a reason why they did not want to approve the request. And so there's 4 things that need to be on the written request: information about what is being requested, an audit of the city's 2015 agreement with the Sioux Falls Development Foundation is requested. The 2016 agreement has not been completed as of today. So the audit objectives are as follows. Number 1, compliance of the Development Foundation with the terms of the agreement, particularly Section 1, which delineates the services to be provided by the foundation. And number 2, the Special Projects Fund. The agreement specifies a Special Projects Funds be created by the foundation for economic development, retention, recruitment, and expansion efforts. The audit will determine what the foundation has specifically done with these monies provided by the city of Sioux Falls. Reason for the request: the agreement has been in place for a number of years. We have not audited the agreement. The requester would like the work completed by 2016 year end if possible, and the contact person would be Rex Rolfing, City Council Chair.
Questions?
Yes, I have one. The 2016 agreement is not in place. Is it being held up by any reason of the requester for this audit, or is that just something that doesn't happen as a matter of time?
Yeah, last year's, the 2015 wasn't approved until August of 2015, so that seems to be...
Regular occurrence?
Yeah, regular occurrence, so,
Thank
yeah.
you.
It's in sync. Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve this special audit.
I would move to approve, and then I have a question.
Okay?
Second.
Second. All in favor, aye? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, question.
Yes, Councilor Erpenbach.
This particular request, it's being asked that it be done by the end of the year. Is that possible? Did staff affirm that that's going to be a possible thing to do? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you for your
I appreciate you thinking ahead like
consideration.
that, too. Thank you.
Okay. The internal audit?
I'll do it.
Okay.
Yep.
Isn't this, I see pictures in here. Is that usual for a auditor to do pictures and a report?
I did pictures, yes, I did. Those are my pictures, so. And I was told on one of the pictures I was very kind by management. They said I could have, that picture right there, they said I was very kind. I could have found many worse examples, and if you drive around Sioux Falls, you'll see much worse examples. So this audit is of the storm drainage division. We have not done an audit of the storm drainage before in the 10 years that we've had internal audit, so this is the very first one. The purpose of the storm drainage division, which is a part of the Public Works MOU, is to basically 3 purposes: to improve the regional water quality. Another purpose is to maintain the infrastructure of the storm drainage system. And the third is to prevent flooding of private property by the proper functioning of the storm drainage system. And that is probably the proper term. Some people refer to it as a storm sewer system. It's kind of an unfortunate name because people then tend to think that if it's a sewer, then it's being treated. And the rainwater, as it comes down during a rain event, is simply going into the infrastructure. It's not being treated. It usually ends up in the river. And so there's part of it, the education campaign the city engaged in is to just remind people that whatever you put in that drain, that storm drainage system is going right in the river. It's not being treated. So, avoid putting anything that you don't want to see in a Big Sioux River. Well, we had several objectives here. We had 5 objectives. Number 1 is determine if typical best management practices related to storm water and drainage are being used, and that's the industry buzzword is BMPs, that best management practices. And number 2, determine if those efforts are effective to protect the water quality, maintain the system, and protect private property. And then there's something called the MS4 permit. That's the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Permit. And that is issued by the State Department of Environment and Natural Resources. And we want to make sure that we have compliance with that MS4 permit. And number 4, determine if the internal control structure is functioning to ensure that the operational information contained in that MS4 annual report is accurate. And then lastly, determine if the storm drainage fund has sufficient revenue to fund its operating capital cost. Now, for accounting purposes, technically it's classified as a special revenue fund. However, we tend to view it as an enterprise fund, such as the water reclamation, landfill, et cetera. It has there's a storm drainage fee that provides most of the revenue. And last year that brought in about $6.5 million into the fund. So as far as the results, starting on page 3, typical best management practices are being used. We look at a typical list of what we would expect to see in a municipality. The EPA has like a menu of the activities that a municipality could use. There's no BMP that works in every single location. There can be differences in regions. But we looked at what the city is doing in the various categories, and we seem to have the typical BMPs that you'd want to see, such as doing street sweeping at least twice a year. That reduces the amount of debris that gets in the storm drainage system. We have citizen volunteers that do a periodic cleanup of the Big Sioux River, thus educating the public and removing potential pollutants. The city conducts regular inspections of construction sites to make sure that that debris from the construction site isn't getting into the storm drain system. And we do regular maintenance on the storm inlets, and this was back in October last year. You can see the color changing on the tree there. That's near downtown there by, I think that's on 8th Street near Minnesota Avenue there. And they have that hose thing on the front of the truck is used to, they put that into the storm drainage system, and then they use a water system to remove or dislodge the debris. And then they have basically like a giant vacuum cleaner that removes the debris. And their crews are doing that throughout the year to maintain make sure that they're clear of debris so that they work in time of a major rain event. As far as maintaining the water quality and maintaining the infrastructure and protecting property, we did get some data from the DENR. They do regular monitoring of the quality of the Big Sioux River water at various locations in Sioux Falls, and several, like 6 or 7 locations on a regular basis. So we were able to get that information. I put it in an Excel spreadsheet, kind of had an average of what the results were for the last 10 years. It wasn't really definitive as far as can we say that what we're doing is working. We looked at what's called conductance, and we looked at total dissolved solids, and those are 2 measures of pollutants in the water. The trend, though, in the last 3 years is pretty good. As you can see there, from about 2013, 2014, you can see right there. That's a good trend there, last 3 years, and also here. So there's some indication that it's working. And some of that is really out of the control of the city. The Big Sioux River starts up in, I think, at Lake Campesca and Watertown, and there's pollutants entering the system way before it gets to Sioux Falls, so it's not completely under our control. But so that's a little bit of maybe a slight indication that we're making a difference there. As far as the major rain events, we've had the misfortune of having several major rain events where we get 7, 8, 9 inches of water very quickly in the last few years. And management has been very happy with the results. The city council, previous city councils have authorized very, very large dollar amounts available for infrastructure improvements, and that seems to be paying off with making the pipes bigger and just improving the infrastructure. And so the streets are still going to fill with water, but they're designed to do that in a major rain event. If you had a storm drainage system that could handle 9 inches of water in a few hours, it would be very expensive. Basically, I was told the streets would be like bridges. In major rain events, streets are going to fill with water, but that's better than having the neighborhoods or people's homes fill with water. So we think that's working. We do have, though, another thing that the city is doing on a regular basis. They have a crew assigned to televise the pipes, and we went out to a crew and just observe what they're doing. There's a picture of the camera that they put down into the storm drainage system, and then there's a truck right by there, and they have the TV monitors, and they can record the condition of the pipe, and that's automatically, or the next day the city engineer responsible for that has that information on his computer. So they can monitor the condition of the infrastructure on a regular basis, going throughout the whole city. I think every 5 years they want to get about 20% of the city recorded, and so they can keep on top of the infrastructure. The backlog, the problem has been as you saw that picture of the storm drainage on Southeastern Drive there, if I get the right page, that's where the backlog has come. I think they put in about $200,000 a year into the budget to have crews go out and repair these. It's a combination of city crews and contractors. Usually the contractors take the busy streets like 41st, and then the city crews will take the residential streets, and they'll repair these storm inlets. But as you drive around, you'll notice a lot of them are in bad shape. And the one thing that management has done to address this was they requested 2 more FTEs from the city council. So those 2 FTEs have been hired, and so we have more manpower or women power working on these storm inlets. And so we're trying to address that situation. But certainly they do take a beating, especially from snowplows in the wintertime when the blades come by. A lot of times they'll hit that concrete, and then they're also susceptible to rust and other damage. So that is being addressed. We had, and then we looked at the results of the increase in the storm drainage fees on the financial condition. I put that in Appendix 2 there. You can see the last 5 years, the revenue and expenditures. The fund balance has been going up. Now, that would have kicked in for 2015 with the change in the storm drainage fees, so that fund balance is getting a little healthier. And so we said that they definitely needed the increased revenue to keep up with the capital expenditures, including also the repair and replacement. And then they also have to maintain the levy system as well from that fund. And so we think it's headed in the right direction. It's a little early to be sure about that, but there may be further fee increases for future city councils to approve. But we thought that was going in the right direction, that they were getting sufficient revenue now to address all the responsibilities they have for maintaining the infrastructure and improving the regional water quality. We had 2 recommendations there on page 8 of the report. And the first recommendation was that management should develop specific ways to evaluate the effectiveness of the BMPs. Management knows exactly what they're doing. They can identify what they're doing. We would encourage them to develop ways of measuring, is it really being effective, what they're doing. That management's response is there. It would require some more specialized equipment, and especially taking samples during a rain event, and then you could get some data that would tell you, are you really, your BMPs, are they really improving the water quality. So that's what we recommended. And it's up to management when they can implement that. You can see the response there. The second one was that they should develop written policies and procedures for their major activities. It's a fairly new, as far as the organization of this division, they did not have a full-time manager. It was kind of a division that was on paper. It was simply, they would keep track of the revenue and expenditures. But as far as who did the actual work, it would be people from engineering, people from various public works divisions that would do the work. In 2014, they reorganized. They created a new position, a storm drainage manager, Andy Berg. And so we think the next step now is just for the major activities, they probably need to have written policies and procedures developed as that division kind of matures. And if there's any questions, I'll try to answer those.
Do we have some questions? Councilor Nice.
On page 7, the storm drainage fund balance, the difference between the assets and liabilities has steadily increased from $7.5 million to $9.5 million.
Yes, I had that on the...
Do you find that to be a appropriate amount of money? Is it not enough? Is it too much? Should it be a pay-go?
Well, they had a consultant do a very detailed rate analysis, trying to figure out what are the current needs, and then also what are going to be the future needs, and then proposing a rate adjustment for the city council, which was, I think, approved in, I believe, 2014, or I think before, obviously, our council members, Council Member Rolfing remembers that. Yeah, the consultant was trying to come up with what does the fund need, what's the target, what do we need to get at to have sufficient funds available for all the responsibilities of that division, and that's we didn't go in and check their work or verify that. We're just kind of reporting on did that rate increase appear to meet the expectations of management, and and then we just want to give that information to the council so they could see the last 5 years or so of where it's at. So. Okay, and it was to make sure there was sufficient revenue so when the capital needs come along, that you have the money there. Yeah, it may seem like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money in that, we have a $10 million fund balance when you're only maybe spending $6 or $7 million a year. It seems like excessive. However, those we're an expanding city, especially at the outlying areas. We have to create what they call retention ponds or detention ponds. And the idea now in best management practice is to try to keep the water in the neighborhood as long as possible and then slowly release it into the system rather than trying to get it, say, into the Big Sioux River as quickly as possible. So they'll do those retention ponds and detention ponds. And if you drive around, especially on the newer sections of town, especially in the south part of town, you'll see those areas where it's and they look nice. I mean, they're nice green areas, but they're intended to retain the water there, and it takes some money to create those, maintain those, and then you simply have the infrastructure. You see the picture of those storm inlets. You drive around, and we haven't been keeping up. Now, the addition of the 2 extra people will help a lot, and then so we just have to maintain what we have.
And I also had a question about the sump pump retrofits, and that might be better for them. And I can wait if we want to see if.
Okay, we can wait on that.
Yeah.
If you guys will hang around for a question. And I've got a question along those same lines. So I'll wait, and it'll be better answered by you guys, by Andy and everybody. Counselor, anybody else up here have a question? Counselor Staley, do you have a comment? You may.
As we're talking about, it's great to hear about keeping the streets cleaned. And I think we used to do that 3 times a year. So hopefully we're going to maintain that level of service. But the question I had with the water quality, have they ever talked about limiting the amount of herbicides that we put on lawns? Because that also has a lot of runoff going into the storm sewer systems. Was that looked at for best management practices?
Andy or someone maybe could answer that question better? I don't think you're a fertilizer expert.
Neither am I, unfortunately. Andy Berg.
You're a runoff expert, though.
Environmental stormwater manager for the city. The herbicides, the pesticides, that is something we have been looking at. We do not have any procedures in place or restrictions on that right now, but there are other communities that have gone to restricting the certain amount of different chemicals in those fertilizers. So something we're looking at when we speak with consultants and experts in that field, we talk through that. We haven't come to a point where we're ready to propose restrictions yet, but certainly are aware of that issue and looking at the alternatives.
Super. Anything else? Just a second. I have a question. Did you have a question? Anybody? What happens when, or do we ever find that retention ponds or detention ponds are not large enough for what, because of some change or because it was calculated wrong? Does that ever happen? And if so, what do we do about it?
Occasionally, it'll happen. Generally, the newer ponds, we have the drainage studies available so that we can go and check those and also check the volume that's currently out there versus what the design was and clean it out if it's just lost volume due to sediment loading, that kind of thing. If it's an older pond or an area of town that hasn't been studied in many years, a lot of times we'll commission a new drainage study to see if that was what was designed X number of years ago is meeting our current design standards. If it's not, then we look at what are our alternatives to bring that neighborhood into compliance with our design standards, whether it's measures up in the watershed itself or expansion of the pond, or there's a variety of different things we look at to try and meet that need. Occasionally, certain areas of town, you can't meet the standard because there is no place to improve things beyond that. And then it goes to some times where we look at a buyout of a home that may be flooding. And there are benefits to that as well, where you're buying out the home that floods, and then you're also removing impervious area, and potentially if it's a block or something to that effect, then you can possibly do some water detention or low impact development on those parcels.
Super. Councilor Staley, did you have another question, and did we answer your?
One more question. And have we, I know you're talking about green spaces where they're going to remove those homes by the floodplain. Have we looked a little more into doing that rain garden idea along curbsides? I know we're doing the gardening thing, but, planting more natural plantings that would absorb those herbicides that do get out from lawns and such. Have you looked at that too?
Yeah, in general, we call that, it's all lumped under the term low impact development. And we actually have a consultant on board right now that is helping us come up with kind of a matrix or a menu of low impact development design standards that we would look to bring forward and hope to put into our design standards chapter 11 that will provide developers and also residents the opportunity to do things on a more localized level, rain gardens, infiltration swales, that type of thing, that developers can do that will reduce their infrastructure costs as well as ours in the long term. The specific areas right now, we don't have that engineering standard in place. We have some BMPs that are similar to that, but the low impact development, our push towards low impact development is really starting right now. We've done some things in the past, but like I said, we've got a consultant on board. We're looking actively at places we can do it and what those impacts are to other city divisions, departments, making sure that we don't step on toes or negatively affect other parts of our city's standards. But that's in progress right now.
Super, super. So we're working on it, and we can expect something in the next month or so? No.
Not the
How
next
about the
month.
next couple of years?
Oh, yes, I would hope within the next year. Yeah.
Okay, super. Yes, Councilor Neisert.
First of all, I'd like to say that in my short time in the council, one of the most common calls you'll get from a constituent will have to do with storm drainage. It can be lots of things, drainage ways in their backyard, you know, the curb and gutter, all of this. And I want to say that Andy and Lance have been wonderful. They've answered a lot of questions, and Andy spent maybe an hour with me once in his office explaining storm drainage and, you know, kind of dumbing it down. And it was really, really good. So thank you. Sump pump retrofits. I was just at a citizen's house a couple days ago who asked me to come out, and they just had installed it, and he's very happy about that. And he had some other questions about his street, but it was making me think about how do you determine where you're going to target for a sump pump retrofit? Do you have a master plan? Are you trying to get everywhere eventually? Is it, I mean, you know, how do you decide what neighborhood to go to? And do you have enough funding right now? It's in the CIP to do what you need to do.
Well, there's always more neighborhoods. So, you know, the funding, I think we're doing a good job of paying for the new systems that go in and also retrofitting neighborhoods. The retrofit program has multiple factors on how we decide where we're going next. A big part of it is nuisance pumpers that maybe pump throughout the winter. So we have ice in our streets that requires constantly cutting it out. Or they pump when it's even dry out and algae buildup creates slippery conditions for folks passing through the area. There's a petition that neighborhood folks can sign, and anywhere from one to a whole neighborhood can sign and submit to us. Those basically help prioritize those neighborhoods if the neighborhood is looking for that. And then our own inspections, you know, just as we go around town, if we're seeing we're going to have a capital project in an area and there's a lot of water flowing through the curb day after day, is that an area we need to focus on because we don't have collection systems in there? And then street deterioration. You know, some areas where streets are really, the asphalt's really tired, you start looking around and a lot of times there are a lot of sump pumps in those areas as well. So it's multiple factors that lead into it, but we do try and prioritize it based on those factors. So we've got a 5-year layout of those areas, but it does change if we do run into something unknown that we didn't know about that is a problem.
And one follow-up, and again with sump pumps. So in my neighborhood, new development, they have the sump pump collection system in the backyard. Now, I think I can think of one person on that block who's connected to it, and they did it after the fact and because the water was so bad. We have people, you know, the neighbor behind me, he pumps 24/7, 365. He has 2 sump pumps in there, and he's got battery backups, and he's living in paranoia all the time. But it's all developed, and so nobody really wants to go tear up their lawn, and I've gotten different quotes, and there's all that debate, as you know, is do we force people to hook up at the time of construction? And I had a home builder tell me, you know, when we're sitting down and we're planning a home, and I tell them you can spend $1,000 to hook up to the sump pump system, or you can have upgraded countertops. It's a pretty simple, you know.
Right.
I mean, you know which way that they're going to go. So I guess the only thing I was thinking about is, let's say on my block, if we do it as a one-off, I've got to hire a guy to come in, and I got a quote for it, and it was quite a bit more than I expected it to be, because it's probably $40 in materials, you know, for the PVC. It's the labor. Is there anything that is, I mean, as a city, if you could get, you know, a whole block to agree to it or something like that, where, you know, you get the, if they're coming in anyway, that there could be a discount and they could be assessed, some way in which, you know, you got a problem on this block, let's go in and just knock them all out and get them all connected. I'm not sure how that would be facilitated. Has anybody thought about that?
We don't have any authority to do it. We could certainly encourage it. The only time we have authority to do it is if someone is a nuisance pumper and they're causing issues for that neighborhood. By ordinance, we can force them to connect to that system that's already there. If there is no system, then we can't. We have had lengthy discussions about going to a mandatory connection at the time of home building. Worked with Councilor Kiley on that in the past year. It's certainly something that isn't off the table yet because the systems are there, and a lot of folks don't know that it's an option until they've already built their house, installed their landscaping, put their fences in, that type of thing. So it's certainly something that we're hoping to get more utilization out of the system than it is right now. So whether we have to go to mandatory or possibly it's an education campaign where we encourage more people to connect at the time of building than after the fact, that's another option.
And maybe just a quick finale.
One more.
One more. Yeah, I don't want to do things incrementally and keep increasing home prices, but the other thing that I think about is we're putting in all this infrastructure, and it's not being used. I mean, that has a cost too. And as the citizens I do go see that are getting these retrofits, it's because of what you talked about. Their road is falling apart, and it's because of that nuisance pumping. So what you're doing is you're getting them connected so that when you and then the road comes right behind it so that the new road doesn't get damaged. So there's an infrastructure cost to not connecting as well. So it's I hope we continue that conversation.
Councilor Ralphing?
Yes.
If I can follow up, because it's on
Councilor
that point.
Kiley.
And I have worked with Andy a lot on this particular issue over the last year and a half, really. And it is somewhat frustrating because we do have an investment on the city side in providing the materials for the sump pump collection systems. We're paying for that. The developer is paying to put it in. But I believe at one of our meetings, we were told that on average about 12% of the homeowners are maybe connecting, and that's based on self-reporting from different home builders. So obviously we have our work cut out for us, and we've met with the Home Builders Association to encourage them to continue to promote this, because yes, I do agree, $1,000 for, and it could be closer to $500 in reality, but whether it's $500 in an upgrade in your kitchen or something that's going to go underground, they don't think about it until their basement fills up with water, and now thousands and thousands of dollars of home furnishings are destroyed as a result. So I think a lot of it has to do with how it's presented to them initially. So I think we still need to continue to work on that, because we are finding areas, and I was in one just recently where the individuals significant water issues throughout their property, and they had no idea that there was even a sump pump collection system there that they could have hooked in. So we still have our work cut out. But thank you for your assistance with that, Andy.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? I would entertain a motion to accept this audit.
So moved, Erpenbach.
Second. Okay.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. We're now at the open discussion part of our agenda. Hearing, you have some open discussion?
In the next couple of weeks, I'll send out an email. We'll try to schedule the last two meetings of the year, probably one for the fall and then one for December. So I'll use that doodle.com tool, and appreciate if you would respond to the little poll. That helps a lot with the planning. So
Yep.
Look for that in about 2 weeks or so.
Super. Councilor Erpenbach.
Just question about planning. I know it's not August yet, but planning for 2017 in terms of the audit schedule. I haven't been on this committee that long, so I'm trying to remember, Rich, when do we start kind of thinking about what happens in 2017?
For audits?
Right.
Yeah. I usually send out an email to the elected officials and to the directors like October, November, asking for their input. And then we kind of start assembling based on our risk assessment and requests. And then in the December meeting, I'll usually present the annual audit plan for your consideration, and then ask to be adopted by resolution by the full council shortly after. So that's kind of the way. So
Good question. Thank you for bringing that up, Councilor.
yeah.
Okay, hearing